Hey guys, as usual, here on Midnight's Edge, you're listening to Kevin and Andre.
Greetings.
We're here talking again about Fantastic Four. As you know, we're just days away until the movie is opening. It's going to be out here in the US on Friday with various showings taking place earlier. What we're going to talk about today, in part at least, is that the marketing is now in its final stages and in high gear. You know, we're in that last critical week. We've got these awkward interviews. We've got the marketing trying to make the people involved with this just look as almost as victims.
Yeah, it kind of seems that way, because the marketing campaign really has been two-faceted. You've had the usual array of posters and trailers and TV spots, but then you also have the various interviews which have been given to the media. They have, one way or the other, addressed the various fan concerns, because as we all know, the fans revolted against the movie pretty much from day one for a variety of reasons. But the one that Fox marketing seemingly really latched onto were the few but disgusting complaints about Michael B. Jordan's ethnicity, and they dismissed everything else as racism.
And it's easy to see why they did this, because here in America, especially when there's something that's picked up upon as racism, it's basically considered social murder. When you can tag that into anything you say, you sort of become invincible.
Even if most of the complaints, even those about Jordan, aren't so much about the race bending, but rather about where they chose to race bend, because they chose the one character where it was awkward or problematic. By changing him, you have to change the family dynamic one way or the other. Whereas if they instead had just made Reed Richards black, they would have bypassed the whole issue.
And it seems much more empowering to have the de facto leader of the Fantastic Four kind of taking that place.
And also, what we need to remember is that it's not uncommon to race bend. It happens all the time, and yeah, you have some squabbles here and there, but for the most part, there isn't all that much dissension anymore. Like, no one cares about Will Smith's character in the Suicide Squad. The character was ethnically white in the comics. And the same with Heimdall in the Thor movies. No one really cares all that much about it. But here, there is this massive outrage. I don't think the outrage is all that massive. It's just that the media has hyped it up to be more massive than it really is, to drown out all the other complaints about the movie, which, unlike the race bending, actually are legitimate complaints. The articles and the interviews increasingly paint a picture of the production as a victim of racism and as a victim of bullying.
For example, Miles Teller has kind of stated that he knows fans hate him. And I think part of that is, maybe to an extent the fans are a little uncomfortable because we got such a young Reed Richards. It's kind of a bratty, entitled statement that, I know the fans hate me. Kind of a toolish thing to say.
Yeah, he's not going to change any hearts and minds with that attitude. The same goes for Trank, who has really been portrayed as a victim in the two LA Times articles that we have spoken about in earlier videos. He's been under scrutiny and he couldn't deal with it. Trank talking about his tragic man-boob origin sub-story with what a horrible childhood he had. That's why he had this entitlement to take properties and change them just for the sake of changing them.
Including making it a sequel to Chronicle.
And he takes it even further, because he continued his sub-story on an audio podcast with Kevin Smith, where he spoke about a variety of different topics, but he also spoke about how he didn't get all that much ahead in Hollywood, despite his father's Oscar.
Right, and his father, what we're talking about here is his dad was actually a documentary maker, and he did documentaries about the Holocaust, which as a Jewish person, this would be immensely important to him. But, I think what's sort of funny here is this entire podcast, he basically had to try and make up for the fact that, his dad was already a filmmaker, and he even at one point says, they think we being the kid of a filmmaker, you get so much, but there's very little that's given to you. Well, I would point out, except for maybe some key introductions, which is the entire difference between an indie filmmaker and a Hollywood filmmaker.
As well as foreign filmmakers wanting to break out, who has quite a few issues with his statements there. And still, they somehow are able to make it without his head start, which just goes to show for how much harder they have to work.
Yeah, there's an interesting narrative in there about how kind of the most unlikely people seem to get ahead in Hollywood, and I think there's a little bit of discussion about kind of feminist circles talking about how men who haven't really proven themselves in the industry do get ahead, and I think at some point maybe Trank will become part of that narrative.
It's certainly not unthinkable. But speaking of narrative, so this all paints a picture of the marketing trying to portray the cast and the crew and the whole production as a victim of mean fans and vicious media. Which brings us to an awkward interview which has been making the rounds recently, which was performed at the Rock 100.5 morning show in Atlanta.
In particular, this was featured on BuzzFeed. They did a really good kind of write-up of this with screenshots and stuff. They confronted the cast on a couple of issues that are kind of sticky, such as the race issue.
The movie. Start the movie. Fantastic Four. The obvious question, obviously for you two. I'm a fan of superheroes. I know the backstory. I have not yet dug into the backstory between Sue Storm and Johnny Storm.
Yeah. Sue Storm was adopted. Is that the question?
Well, not yet. Don't ruin my question. Have you seen the movie? No.
Oh.
I did that on purpose.
We haven't either.
Okay.
Really?
No.
You
just know your scenes and that's it.
I mean, we read the script.
Yeah. But you haven't seen the whole thing. When will you see it? Or do you not see movies?
We might see it at the premiere.
That's a premiere. You're going to wait till then and get blown away.
But from what I understand, you're brother and sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I missing something?
No.
The obvious question
is what, that we're brother and sister?
Yeah, but you're white and you're black.
You are both.
But how does that happen? Because in the other one, it's just their brother and sister.
Yes.
And there was no backstory.
Jessica Alba.
I think it's the same thing with this one too. I don't think there's any backstory, just brother and sister.
No, I mean, how does that happen? There has to be some type of adoption thing going on.
Hey, or you think
is that it?
I mean,
no, I
don't know. They could be raised as brother and sister. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different family dynamics that could be without the obvious adoption.
Okay.
Is that a big portion of the movie that explain all that?
You'll have to see it and check it out.
You haven't seen it.
No, I don't need to see it. I already know what's up.
So, which was interesting because I would think that if they were doing an interview about this movie, they would have told them subjects that were out of bounds. If they actually leapt into this, they didn't get stopped for it. They didn't get stopped for talking about an out of bounds issue. So one presumes they just allowed them to talk about the race issue, even though Michael B. Jordan's defense usually is that he doesn't want to draw attention to it because of the ignorance surrounding it. Anyhow, so the interviewer gets even weirder after that.
Hey, don't get me wrong. I love you in the shooter.
Oh, thanks, man.
You're way high. Why did you cut the hair?
I'm sorry. I know you don't like it. I can tell.
No, but your hair was beautiful. No, it's not true.
No, man, that's not true.
No, you look great with short hair or long hair, but the fact the long hair was excellent.
What's going on, man? So did you cut your hair for this?
I cut my hair for the movie I just did.
Just did?
Yeah.
What's in the movie? What would you cut your hair for?
They asked me to.
I'm
an actress. I have to be a comedian.
Will you guys stay in this? That's the other question. Will there be a second and a third, and will this? Because I just hate when.
Yeah, they already have the actual one that's already announced.
If we make it.
So this could be a 3 or 4 movie run for you guys.
We hope so.
Yeah, and you're gonna grow your hair back out, hopefully.
I promise it'll.
And yours, Billy.
Is that weirding me out that he's doing that? It's creeping me out.
Which part?
The haircut.
I mean.
I'm a toe guy. Your toes are fine.
Wow.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. We're going to wrap this up.
Thank you guys for coming out today.
Yeah, because then he starts talking about Mara's hair and how she was hotter with long hair rather than short, and how he hopes it's going to grow out again, before he starts talking about her toes and the interviewer's sexual toe fetish. And then, after the interviewer has talked about his toe fetish, then she walks up and she quietly says that now the time is up and they have to finish. She didn't storm in angrily and say this is out of bounds, this interview is over, or express any kind of outrage. Just pure professional, time is up, after sitting through all of this awkward and stuff like that. And of course, that makes me think, this is just a theory, but what if this was staged and planned to make it so that they appear as victims?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think we see things like this where the PR people do kind of sit back and let the people they're with handle it. But what's really weird to me is we have such a young cast here. I think the PR person would be on extra careful guard of these four, because they've done so little in terms of like a big PR tour. Like, it's one thing to see somebody like that letting Robert Downey Jr. to handle all of his press, because he's a pro. He's been doing it for years. But these guys don't know anything about what it's like to handle a weird interviewer. So I would have thought she would be right away handling that. So you have to wonder, yeah, I mean, was it planned out?
And what also makes me think that is the interviewer's choice of questions, because look at what he did. The first thing he did was jump straight into this race bending issue, and you know Fox just loves that, because then they can point to all criticism and say racism, and just go with that and just blanket state all criticism and silence everything that way. So first he does that, and then it becomes more personal on Mara about her looks. Then you get like this almost sexual harassment aspect of it as well. What he didn't do was ask any of the questions that Fox does not want asked. He didn't ask about any of the rumors from production. He didn't ask, what did Trank do to make you cry? He didn't ask, are you happy about not being part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? How does that feel not being invited to their Christmas parties? Why are you trying to latch on to the Marvel logo in the marketing? He didn't ask any of those things, because those are genuinely uncomfortable questions that Fox do not want asked. And he stayed well clear of those. But here, they kind of got a win. The video got pulled down. The article is still out there with this interviewer asking the unprofessional questions, and then they can have these BuzzFeed articles about how the actors really did an amazing job dealing with the difficult questions, and it just fits right in with this marketing narrative of the cast and crew and the movie as victims. And on top of that, the radio station and the interviewer in question gets loads more attention. This was not the first awkward interview, planned or otherwise.
So what's going to be your take on Sue Storm, and just kind of maybe a little bit about the nature of your relationship with Reed in the movie and with Johnny?
Well, I don't know very much about it, which is weird but true. All I know is that it's going to be a very different take on the film than what probably people expect. I'm not really familiar with the comic books very much. I mean, I've read a few of them since I got the part, but I think we're making a very grounded version of superhero film, and I just trust Josh Trank's vision, because I was a really big fan of his last movie, Chronicle, and I think that the cast he got is really fantastic. I'm so excited to work with Miles Teller and Mike, everyone, Jamie Bell as well. I think he's gotten a really interesting group together. So yeah, I don't really know much about it, but we're starting in a few weeks. So. Have
you tried on the suit? And
I don't know that there is a suit. People keep saying that to me, but I don't even know that there's a suit. Maybe there is.
Nice.
As of now, I haven't tried on a suit.
I was going to say real quick, I have to know what it was like playing Doom, because holy F, like, all of us are so excited to see Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it too, and my nerves really, I mean, the only thing I can tease you about is what I worked on the most was the voice, because it's the one thing nobody has, even in the cartoons when I watch them, I'm like, so where's he from? There's a mild change, and I'll tell you just because of our history. He's Victor Domashev, not Victor Von Doom in our story, and I'm sure I'll be sent to jail for telling you that. But the Doom in ours comes from him. You know, I'm a programmer, very antisocial programmer, and on blogging sites I'm Doom.
Ah, there we go. I like that.
Yeah, it was cool, man. I mean, Josh, the whole deal, the lo-fi way he did it, the ultra real, it was just nice to be doing that. You know, it was nice to be feeling like we had to come to terms with what was given, you know, by this incident.
So then we had on, let's see, it looks like Saturday and Sunday. Okay, so since Saturday, they'd been queuing up questions for the Fantastic Four guys, for the cast to answer. And it seems like Sunday early they were answering them. And we got some interesting tweets here, and you can kind of continue to see the trend that we've been talking about.
Which would be the trend of no really awkward questions. Like, these are obviously very screened questions, only taking the pleasant ones, steering clear of any of the many controversies, such as what was your favorite line from the movie. Yeah, it's really interesting. What is a bit funny though is that Miles Teller, he's able to say that I've always thought of myself as Mr. Fantastic, so it's weird when people call me Miles Teller.
Yeah, that kind of made me smile a little bit. It's kind of funny. One more douchey thing. Oh, so one thing that Kate Mara said that I see here, they asked her, would you rather win an Oscar or gain superpowers in real life? And she said, gain superpowers, then I could manipulate the Oscar, which is actually hilarious because I think it's going to take superpowers to have this movie mentioned anywhere near the Oscars.
I think is also a bit tragic in a sense because there is so much manipulation going on behind the scenes of the Oscars that you probably don't even need superpowers to do it. Just metric ton of influence.
This is a power Kate Mara probably already has, especially given her background growing up as a very well-to-do kid.
I'm sure someone around her is able to influence things in that direction already, even if she personally might not have that sway just yet.
Fox is actually trying to prepare, at least it looks like, for how they're going to respond if this movie fails.
We have learned from Bleeding Cool what many have suspected all along, that you have several different factions within Fox with very different views on the movie, because prior to the production of the movie, we have learned that there were those who wanted to just get rid of the whole thing and sell it back to Marvel, who knew this was a corporate albatross that was just going to weigh them down, whereas others genuinely believed in the movie. And then these seemingly have been going back and forth, and these factions are still at it according to Bleeding Cool, and they have agreed to try to sell the movie as best as they can, get the best opening weekend possible with the trailer that even the haters within Fox liked. It's funny though that the final trailer was so poorly received by everyone else.
Well, that's the thing about this movie. I mean, if there's anything bad to point to about this, it's not as much the trailers. I mean, the trailers are the least of their problems.
Yeah, the trailers are perfectly fine generic, but they go against what they keep on saying about the movie as this groundbreaking, unique, and different thing. Because the trailers paint it as the most generic superhero movie you can imagine.
But I think there's probably people out there who say, you know, I don't understand why people say this movie is so bad. It looks alright, which is exactly what the trailer seems to be. A trailer is alright, and therefore kind of resets expectations.
Now, what Bleeding Cool is hearing right now is that some people in Fox feel that other people in Fox don't realize what they have on their hands.
You mean a steaming pile of garbage?
Yeah, exactly. Some feel they have a steaming pile of garbage, and others feel they have something really worthwhile. And so the plan is to push promotion and a trailer that even the haters agree that they like, and use the momentum to push the audience in for a strong opening weekend. But then, of course, you have those who want to embargo all the reviews and limit the previews because they just don't have that faith in the movie. And that, I think, is really telling, because the movie by now is finished and they have a finished product. So what this tells us is that, assuming that Bleeding Cool is on the money here, you still have factions within Fox that have zero confidence in the movie, and they've seen it.
Maybe we need an internal Fox Rotten Tomatoes, just so we can see like how many people at Fox like the movie.
I'm sure that the people at Fox would be very interesting to compare their internal Rotten Tomatoes prior to the movie's release with the actual Rotten Tomatoes.
It may be very close.
Out.
So the thing about you said something interesting there, which is that they have the final movie, but the cast has actually said that they haven't seen the movie, despite being present at an advanced screening in Atlanta.
A few days back, there was this screening in Atlanta, Georgia. And the cast of the movie, they were present. They were there to introduce the screening, but then evidently they left before the screening actually begun. So they still haven't seen the movie. When she was asked by the BBC, Kate Mara stated that she still hadn't seen the movie because she would rather see it with a real audience. So, people of Atlanta, Kate Mara doesn't consider you a real audience, just so you know.
Which is a very sensitive issue, because we've actually had a lot of discussion about what kind of audience you get in Atlanta in this last year, including the owner of their basketball team kind of famously made a big problem for them by saying that basically their black fans don't spend money when they go to a basketball game, and they aren't even particularly likely to have paid for their ticket in the first place because it's so hard to get people to buy tickets in Atlanta. At least this is the accusation, and they have to give away their tickets to people who will not cheer for the team, basically an unenthusiastic audience. So with that sensitive issue, I feel like Kate Mara has kind of stepped in it, and she's kind of just one more person on the bandwagon of the black people in Atlanta are not good audience members.
Wow. Just to repeat Kate Mara's own words. Wow. The movie, of course, as we know, is embargoed up until right before it is released. And Newsbeat asked Miles Teller about this. Miles Teller, of course, plays Reed Richards, and they asked him if he was ready to prove the critics wrong. And that's when he replied that he hasn't seen the movie. But he also added, and I think this is a wonderful hedge, just the preparation for what is to come. Rarely are films of this size critically well received. This is not a movie where we're going to go on Rotten Tomatoes and it's going to be at 80 or 90%.
As if that was what some people were sitting there thinking was going to happen.
Well, we never know. Maybe Vaughn did wonders in the reshoot, but still that just says everything about the cast's own expectations of the movie when he goes out and says right now that the movie is not going to get the 80s or 90s on Rotten Tomatoes. That's really damning.
I mean, well, I think it will be more interesting to see if this movie falls in line with average expectations for a movie like this, which is probably going to be like 50-60%. But part of me thinks the critics aren't going to feel that way about it. But you never know. I mean, it is going to be, we are kind of rolling the dice here to see if what they do is watchable to the standard critic rather than an actual fan of the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I think that's a huge difference, because for the built-in fan base, the hardcore fans, the movie's dead already. The question is, can they get everyone else? Can they get the casual audience? Can they get in the X-Men fan base?
Who we already know is not that excited about the comics in the first place, and that's why they don't care when they throw what they do on screen.
Which is also why they have Bryan Singer essentially coming out in this promo piece telling them that, oh, you should watch this movie because it's going to be important down the line if you go and see the movie.
Lies. So there has been, of course, lots of talk about crossovers, including the video you referenced with Bryan Singer. And one thing we've heard recently is that Michael B. Jordan wants Namor in the sequel. We're talking about the Submariner, and has previously said you never know what Marvel might have planned. And that's interesting because I'm not sure if he means that in a way where he's saying you don't know what Marvel has planned, so we might not be able to use him because Marvel has plans for him, because as we talked about previously, when Marvel has plans for a character, there's no way they're going to sell it to Fox. Or the opposite, which is that maybe Marvel is planning something with Fox, as if Marvel would ever sit there and plan a movie with Fox at this stage.
Or my favorite theory, which is that he tries to tell the casual audience who isn't all that into the situation between Fox and Marvel, trying to sell the image that this movie is part of the cinematic Marvel universe without saying that it is.
That seems very likely.
In any event, he's not going to get Namor in the sequel because that character is with Marvel, or rather the character is tied up between Marvel and Universal. As far as we can tell, it's the same situation with him as it is with the Incredible Hulk, where Marvel has the movie rights, but Universal have the distribution rights. So neither can make a movie with them without the other party. So he's kind of in limbo. So he's definitely not going to show up in the Fantastic Four anytime soon.
And this has not been the first rumors we've heard of crossover. On the contrary, there have even been planted rumors about crossovers, and of course we've shot those to pieces in our earlier videos. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had even heard that Toby Kebbell wants to take Doom out of Fantastic Four for at least a temporary basis. He kind of made the analogy of referring to it like a free agent in a baseball team, switching sides for a little while, which so he wants to go fight Thor as Doom. And that baseball analogy actually inadvertently reveals just how bad things are between Marvel and Fox, that the suggestion that Doom would move from one to the other would be a shifting of teams.
He also goes on to say that he's probably going to be sued for even saying this.
Which is true.
Which is true, but it also just goes to show just how bad things are between Fox and Marvel. And any kind of talk of any kind of crossover between Fox and Marvel proper, not likely to happen.
Pretty much already knew that if you'd seen our last video. It just bears repeating. But here at Midnight's Edge, in any case, we're going to continue to bring you all the latest when it comes to Fox and Marvel and X-Men, Ivan Ooze, long after Fant 4 Stick is but a memory.
We're going to continue when it's released and do a post-mortem afterwards and follow any future developments with sequels. And we're also going to cover Circus Trank.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit subscribe so you can catch all of our upcoming videos. For more podcasts, news, and reviews, check us out at midnightsedge.net and follow us on Twitter at midnightsedge. Also check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/midnightsedge.